departure time on the longest flight, the Here with Dermot O'Leary. Dermot, how pumped are you?
Like you wouldn't believe, James. It's incredible, isn't it?
Absolutely. Scale of 1 to 10, are you 11?
Oh, aye.
Now, you've flown in this plane before, but what's it like today to be a part of this?
Do you know? Well, I think that it's always an exciting moment. I mean, I've done it. I've had the great privilege of being in the Spitfire twice, but I've never done anything like this. So we're actually going in formation. The guys have just been sort of talking me through it in the briefing. It's just to see and actually to see the silver Spit kind of take off and you know, hopefully get a couple of cheeky snaps while I'm up there. I know you're not supposed to, but
I'm sure you'll be able to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know what this is like. It's the smell. It's what this evokes for me. Until you're in it, it's quite hard to describe, really, because you're just smelling in history.
It's sort of rubber and metal and oil and leather, isn't it?
And it's this. I remember Tom Neal telling me when he was in it. He just said, "Look, the strangest thing is they look so intricate, and of course they are. But when they get in the air, and you can fly, obviously, he said they're just so easy and devilishly wonderful to fly. They just respond to you. And actually, you know, when the Boltby guys take you up, and I've been up with Matt twice, and you know, I remember the first time he said, we'll get up to about 600 feet and then we'll give you a little go. And I said, oh, fine. And I didn't really think anything of it. And we got up there and he said, now over to you. And I just went, no, absolutely not. What are you talking about? I'm wholly unqualified. There it is. Listen.
Well, there it is. Spitfire starting up. Cheers, fella.
Well, here we are. We're ready for the off now. It has been the most extraordinary day at Goodwood. You can see the skies have cleared and it's just a magnificent sight now. There's a real air of expectancy pervading right across the aerodrome. Some passengers have already been flying in the two-seaters a little earlier on, but this is the first start today of this remarkable silver Spitfire. And well, what an achievement it has been just to get this far. It'll be an even greater achievement to, of course, complete the tour. It's going to take some 4 months or so, lots of backup plans. But in the background, alongside the Spitfire, what we'll see for the next few minutes when they get airborne, a few formation flypasts. And that will be in tandem with the 3 two-seaters. And there is Matt just... pretty much, that's a comfortable looking feeling, being a pilot myself, when that means he's looking pretty happy. There's Dermot in the rear seat there. But we've got 3 equally iconic T9s with us today. We have, of course, the home-based Gilda in there. She's affectionately known in the hands of Jim Schofield. That's Sierra Mike 520. On the screen now we've got 341. Of course, that's Parky's personal aircraft, or rather it's called Elizabeth affectionately by the Flying Legends team down at Headcorn. And nods coming all around now, which is fantastic. In the other aircraft, the Arco, the aircraft restoration company, the ex-Irish Air Corps aircraft is Brian Smith. The passengers, as well as Dermot, of course, we've got several other notable names. We have Chris Granger here, as well as David Coulthard. And we've had the pleasure over the last couple of hours of hearing various stories and interviews with all of the guests here today. And also amongst on the ground, left behind, sadly, Taron Egerton, of course, Elton John movie fame, and Rosamund Pike has also been here as well, all ambassadors for IWC. And I have to say, it's a tremendously professional effort and a really, really grand farewell indeed here at the Boltby Academy at this remarkably historic aerodrome at Goodwood, of course, where Douglas Bader himself spent some considerable time. So known as Gertie, here's Matt now taxiing out in the silver Spitfire, a Mark 9, and you can see it finished and polished beautifully in aluminium with all the guns removed, really part of the demilitarizing of this aircraft, not just to, of course, highlight the timeless beauty of its design, but also it does make it a little less provocative than when adorned with camouflage paint. And as a result of that, both Steve Brooks and the rest of the Boltby team hoping to broaden the appeal and reach of the project and gain easier access to nations en route. And by presenting this aircraft in this beautiful bare metal state, they're aiming to highlight all of these wonderful features of not just the Spitfire, but drawing attention, of course, to the unique and famous shape of the airframe, but trying to do good as well. And it was interesting meeting some youngsters from the Fight for Peace campaign, part of the tie-up with IWC and Larius, the sports suppliers. And really wonderful to see so many friends of both companies here today to see this beautiful machine on its way. Of course, originally designed as a short-range, high-performance interceptor by R.J. Mitchell, an equally famous name. Sadly, he never saw the great success of the aircraft. He died of cancer in 1937, but his chief designer, Joe Smith, took over the reins and really developed this aircraft to its full potential. Over 20,000 of them were actually made in 24 different variants, and they served right through until 1956. It was shortly after that, actually, that the Battle of Britain Memorial Flights was formed at Royal Air Force Biggin Hill, itself an equally famous fighter station. Matt now gingerly taxiing out. Of course, none of these Warbird pilots ever like to hang around on the runways. Overheating is one of the big issues of the Merlin engine. Couple of variants flying here today, of course, the 66 and the 70. But all the aircraft beautifully maintained by clearly the owners, and a real pleasure to see so many of them here today. T9's not really a derivative of the Second World War period at all. There was a one-off modification of a Mark 5C by 261 Squadron, and a Mark 9 was converted for use as a trainer by the Soviets. But predominantly the two-seat Spitfire trainer was primarily a post-war program. All four of these, a variety of either the high-level or low-level variant of the fighter Mark 9. And all coming out of the equally famous Castle Bromwich factory. Castle Bromwich, of course, built as a ghost factory after the bombing of the Supermarine Works down near Southampton. And I know an air of expectancy outside now as the pilots get ready to depart. They'll be running through their pre-flight checks, checking the T's and P's as we know it. big difference between those three there is not just that obviously the Silver Spitfire is single seat, but it's also got a massive extra fuel tank behind the pilot, an extra 66 gallons. Interesting configuration, and of course that's all refurbished and made ready by John Romain and his team at the Aircraft Restoration Company across in Duxford. We had an interesting chat this morning about the effect that had on the C of G, and it does tend to oscillate a little bit, and Matt was explaining how gingerly he has to trim the aircraft out. The other factor, of course, as all pilots will be aware of, is that he'll be taking off at quite a heavy weight, but they've not actually landed yet with a full fuel load, and that could be tricky, which means adding somewhere in the region of 20 to 25 knots, and therefore quite a high speed to bring, if there were a technical issue once he gets airborne, he would have to bring that in at a very different speed to what most Spitfire pilots would be used to. He spent many hours training alongside Steve. Steve, of course, still relatively new to the Spitfire world, but I was again chatting to him just 20 minutes or so ago, and he's hugely excited, as everyone is here, for the success of this mission. A wonderful sight. It's extraordinary in many ways that we now have so many Spitfires flying back in UK, probably more than ever before since the end of the Second World War. And of course, there are also a huge number of Spitfire pilots. The Boltby Academy has trained many, but through training at the BBMF, of course, the Flying Legends team down at Headcorn, Biggin Hill, and so many other restorers over the years, has formed a tremendous pool of experienced Spitfire pilots. So we're on the roll now. It's certainly looking good. And they say, if it looks right, it flies right. And I think the whole history of the Spitfire underpins that age-old saying. Tail is up. Good airspeed, good rate of climb. You can hear him going past me outside the studio here at Goodwood. And there she goes. What a marvellous, marvellous sight. Matt, totally committed to flying Spitfires. He pinches himself, I think, every day. He first took to the skies whilst in the RAF CCF section at Exeter School, where he flew the Chipmunk. And I certainly wouldn't want to say too much whilst we have that wonderful sound of a Merlin engine. Matt and Steve formed the idyllic relationship here in generating the school. They've recently added a simulator, and it is exceptional, I can assure you, with the help of some of the engineers from nearby Tangmere. Now able to give tuition before getting airborne, of course, but tuition available as a throughput, a standard training system. And all you need is the money. Talking of money, Matt, of course, did work for an investment bank himself after studying civil engineering at Newcastle University. But he didn't stick at that too long because he was committed to a full career in aviation. He went off to the USA, like so many other pilots, to get his professional licenses. And then hopped down to New Zealand, where he got in what I would call a real aeroplane, a Tiger Moth. Nothing better than having that little tail wheel at the back. works his way through like so many other pilots there. I think you're just seeing our heli-telly in operation. They're going to break off for a short while. There'll be some air-to-air photography taking place. You may well have seen the PC-12 getting airborne on your screens a little bit earlier. That's flown by another well-known ex-BBMF Spitfire pilot and ex-Red Arrow, Ian Smith, or Smithy as he's known colloquially. He's going to be flying that PC-12 around the entire route as the logistics and chase plane. Right now, the weather looking just outstanding for the first leg up to Scotland. The route, of course, is available on the website. And the timing set so that they go through the Arctic areas, Reykjavik, and then across Greenland to the northern coast of Canada, so that they go through that at the warmest possible period. And I understand that the temperatures in the Arctic have been higher than some places have ever recorded before. So we hope that that proves successful. From there on, I guess the tricky areas are probably going to be in Southeast Asia, where the thunderstorms build up regularly every day. And Steve has already declared that the last thing he wants to do is fly the Silver Spitfire into Hong Kong. He says he's going to leave that entirely to Matt. The Silver Spit itself, one of the most original airworthy Spitfires in the world. Manufactured at Vickers Supermarine in 1943, coming out of Castle Bromwich, as so many Spitfires did. Wartime coding and of Mike Juliet 271, but affectionately known around Goodwood as Gertie, and in the hands of Matt. It flew 51 combat missions, an extraordinary number. So many of the later marks of Spitfire didn't actually make it into combat. They went off to other theatres of war as the end was coming. But the Silver Spit was originally delivered from Castle Bromwich to 33 Maintenance Unit at Lynham, and then sent on to 411 Squadron, a Polish repair and salvage unit, are tasked with harmonising the guns and performing test flights before passing the aircraft onto an operational unit. Coming back now through the aerodrome. And what a wonderful sound that is. To have 4 Merlins flying in formation on such a gorgeous day. A sight, perhaps, that was seen over Goodwood many, many years ago during those difficult days of the Battle of Britain. The Silver Spit went on to 118 Squadron, fighter squadron that spent much of its time flying fighter sweeps and escorting bombers over occupied Europe. He went there in February 1944 and saw 16 operational sorties out of RAF Detling near Maidstone in Kent. And some of those sorties included withdrawal cover and escort for B-24, B-17 and B-26 bombers attacking V-1 launch sites as well as fighter sweeps over France. Matt stretching out now into Swan. Following its time with at RAF Detling, it then moved on to 132 Squadron. They formed in 1941 originally as a day fighter unit equipped with Spitfires. And 132 Squadron itself moved between defensive duties in Scotland and then offensive duties in France from the bases in the south of England. Positioning now for another pass in front of the assembled guests of Boltby and IWC. It's been an absolutely marvellous occasion already today, and this now with the sun coming out and the gorgeous Sussex countryside setting a wonderful backdrop. Gertie went on to 132 Bombay Squadron and followed the squadron to Royal Air Force Ford in Sussex in 1944 and saw action then in another 28 operational sorties, which included close escort for B-25 and B-26 bombers, as well as dive bombing of targets on the French coast, before then having a wheels-up landing at RF4 during the night of May the 9th, 1944. Positioning now, stunning sight, that famous elliptical wing. Perhaps with a nudge to the Heinkel factory towards the start of the 1930s, also with their development work as well. But R.J. Mitchell and, of course, Joe Smith really extending the success. And here she pulls away.
Silver One pulling up now. Braking right now.
Wow, Matt and Steve, what an amazing moment to see you finally embark on this epic adventure. Have a great trip, best of luck, the IWC team are all behind you, and fly safely.
Hi Matt, David Coulthard sending you the very best from this epic journey that you're on. Looking forward to seeing you and Steve complete the journey. IWC team, I'm proud to be part of it. Go represent us well in the sky.
Matt, Dermot here, mate. I can't believe this day's come. We've talked about it for years, but I just want to wish you the very best of luck. You've got an incredible journey ahead of you, and it's a wonderful and noble undertaking. I'll see you on the ground sometime soon, mate. Good luck.